Hey guys, tonight we step into the damp straw of a hut somewhere in the heart of Anatolia, and it's not even the worst part of your day. You're about to be born into the Ottoman Empire. And let's just say, you probably won't survive this. Your cradle? A bundle of rags in a corner, shared with a few roaches. Your destiny? Pretty much the same as your parents, their parents. And a few hundred years worth of mud-caked ghosts before them. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're born on a Wednesday, or maybe a Friday, no one really keeps track. There's no clock, no calendar, no doctor. Just a midwife who's also the village gossip. Pulling you into a world where survival is a small miracle and dreams are considered a luxury for people with shoes. Your parents are peasants. So are your neighbors. So is everyone, really. Except that one tax collector who rides into town twice a year like a storm cloud with a mustache. You grow up fast, mostly because there's no other option. By age 4. You're already shooing chickens out of the house and swatting at flies big enough to have names. Your toys. Rocks. Your friends. Goats. School. That's for the sons of scholars and scribes. Not for you. You'll be lucky if you ever hold a book, let alone read one. Historians still argue whether rural Ottoman peasants had anything resembling formal education. But what's clear is, you don't. You learn with your hands. How to tie bundles of firewood, how to spot the good mushrooms from the deathy ones, how to survive winter without losing toes. And when you ask your mother why the world is like this, she just says, Allah wills it, and goes back to boiling weeds for soup. Your father is a thin man with thick hands. He works the same patch of land every day, and it's not even his. The local Sipahi, the cavalryman who owns the land through the Timar system, rides by once a season to collect his share. If he's in a good mood, he'll just nod. If not, he might take a chicken. Or a pig. Or a pig and your uncle. Speaking of pigs, you don't eat them. Not just for religious reasons. But because you can't afford them. Your diet consists of cracked barley, some lentils, and whatever the garden spits out. On a good day, there's a bit of goat cheese. On a bad day, there's just day. You sleep beside the animals in a one-room hut, straw packed in the walls for warmth, which does absolutely nothing. In winter, your breath fogs the air. The first thing you notice in the morning, besides the goat that somehow made it into the house again, is that you're hungry. Not just a little peckish. Deep, bone-scraping, gut-curdling hungry. There's food. Technically. Your mother has scraped together some barley flour and mixed it with water, then slapped the resulting paste onto a flat stone near the fire. The result is a kind of bread, if by bread you mean something dry, brittle, and more likely to chip your tooth than fill your stomach. You chew slowly. It's got texture, at least. Crunchy. Probably weevils. You try not to look too closely. Weevils are common. Protein, if you squint. Some people pick them out. Some people don't bother. You learn early that complaining about food gets you exactly two things, a whack on the head and less food next time. So you eat, and you nod. And you thank your mother as if she's handed you lamb kebab served on a silver platter. Historians still argue whether the average Ottoman peasant consumed 2,000 calories a day. Based on your growling stomach, you're going to guess, not even close. Your village doesn't grow much beyond barley and legumes. The soil is tired, just like you. Years of over-farming and under-manuring have turned it into something resembling powdered brick. And since fertilizer usually comes from livestock, and you have 2 goats and a sickly hen, let's just say the harvests are unpredictable. You dream of wheat sometimes. Soft, golden loaves like the Imam talks about in sermons, paradise bread, he calls it. You wouldn't know. You've only seen wheat flour once, at a wedding, when a wealthier family made a giant communal loaf. It was glorious. You had half a bite. Protein is even rarer. Meat is a celebration food. Which is convenient, because you don't celebrate very often. A chicken might be slaughtered when someone dies. A sheep if someone gets married. You've noticed that the older villagers seem disturbingly excited when anyone in their extended family has a heart attack. Probably because it means stew. And stew, now that's living. Sure. It's just bones boiled with onions and whatever wild greens haven't been peed on by the goats, but still. Warm, salty, with actual flavor. You think about it the way some people think about first love. Salt, by the way, is a luxury. You trade for it, and only in tiny pinches. Your mother keeps it in a little cloth bundle like it's a religious relic. You once tried to sneak a taste and nearly lost a finger. Water comes from the well, or from rain. Or, if it's summer and both of those have failed, you dig a shallow hole and pray. People die of thirst some years. Or worse, they drink from the stream downstream of the tannery. And then they really die. The French scholars sometimes argue that Ottoman villagers were healthier than their European counterparts because of the you work. From the moment your legs are sturdy enough to stand without wobbling like a camel on ice, you are handed a task. Sweep the floor. Haul water. Pick bugs off lentils. Keep the goats from murdering each other. Childhood, as a concept, hasn't quite been invented yet. You are a very small adult, and your job is to suffer in miniature. You're 7 the first time someone hands you a hoe. It's taller than you are. Your hands blister by midday. By evening, they bleed. You're told this is normal. Everyone's hands look like this. You suck on your fingers quietly and pray for rain, not because the crops need it, though they do, but because rain means no one works the fields. Rain is a gift. Rain is your holiday. Ottoman society has a reputation for being structured, even elegant. The sultans collected poetry. The cities glittered with tilework and fountains. Historians talk about the classical age like it was a golden globe, spreading culture and tulips across 3 continents. But you're not a poet. You're a peasant. And your life is mostly mud and orders. You don't get paid. That's not how this works. You live on the land, and in return you work it. It's called Timar, the land grant system. And it's clever, because it means your landlord doesn't need to pay a salary. Instead, you get the privilege of surviving. Technically, you're not a slave. You're just extremely unlucky. Your landlord is a Sipahi, an Ottoman cavalryman granted this land by the state in exchange for military service. He rides through the village once every few months, checking that everything's in order. He wears silk. His horse has nicer shoes than you do. Sometimes, he tosses a coin at a child. Once, he yelled at your uncle for not bowing fast enough. He smells like cloves and goat leather. The Sipahi's steward is the one you really fear. He knows your name. He knows how many sacks of barley you harvested. He knows when your father is sick and can't work, read, hiding in the hills to avoid backbreaking labor for a day. And he always finds a way to take a little more than he should. A few extra eggs. A better chicken. Your good shoes. You try to stay invisible. The Ottoman tax system is layered and confusing, even to the people collecting it. There are regular taxes, emergency taxes, religious taxes, and the just because we can taxes. Historians still argue whether the system was efficient or exploitative. You vote for both. It works, but only if you're at the top. Each year, you owe a fixed portion of your crop. That sounds fair, until the harvest fails. Then you owe that same portion, of nothing. So you borrow. You are not the Sultan. That seems obvious, but it's worth repeating, because in the Ottoman Empire, who you are is carved into the social stone before you ever take your first breath. Birth is not a beginning, it's an assignment. And you? You're not assigned much. The world around you is rigid. Imagine a pyramid made of people. At the tip, one man, one turban, one bed of cushions. The Sultan. Below him, layers of people with longer titles and fancier robes than you'll ever touch. You, dear friend, are somewhere near the base. Possibly under it. In theory. The Sultan is your protector, the father of the people, the shadow of God on earth. In practice, he doesn't know you exist. He has never seen your village. He couldn't point to it on a map. If he even had one. You are a statistic in his tax ledgers, a tiny scribble in Arabic script beside the word barley. But it's not just about the Sultan. The Ottoman social system is built around millets, religious communities that administer themselves under imperial oversight. You're probably Muslim, maybe Sunni, which puts you in the dominant millet. Good for you. If you're Christian or Jewish, life is slightly more complicated. You pay extra taxes. You can't testify against Muslims in court. You don't get to ride horses in town. You wear identifying colors. But otherwise, you're left alone, as long as you behave. Historians still debate whether the millet system was tolerant or segregated. You decide it's a bit of both. You coexist. You trade. You nod at each other in the marketplace. But you do not marry, you do not share holidays, and if your ox wanders into a mosque courtyard, you'll have to publicly apologize with your hat in your hands. Of course, being Muslim doesn't mean you're privileged. Not if you're poor. Wealth trumps belief. Every time. A rich Armenian silk merchant has a better life than you do. So does a Jewish doctor. Even a Greek shipbuilder from Galata might have bread with actual olives on it. You eat crust and call it luxury. The social hierarchy is enforced with subtlety and smoke. It's not written on billboards or carved in stone, but you feel it everywhere. At the mosque, your family sits in the back. At market, the merchant eyes your coins with pity. The palace guards check your papers twice. You are invisible and yet always under scrutiny. And then there's the devshirm. You don't want to talk about it. But you have to. Because it is the most terrifying social ladder in the empire, and you have a son. The devshirm is the child levy. Every few years, imperial officers sweep through the Christian villages of the Balkans, gathering healthy boys between the ages of 8 and 14. The boys are taken, no, stolen, from their families. Converted to Islam. Given new name, you wake before dawn. Not because you want to. Not because you're particularly disciplined. You wake before dawn because if you don't eat. The rooster doesn't crow out of enthusiasm. And you don't rise with the sun because it's romantic. You rise because labor in the Ottoman countryside begins when the ground is still cold and your bones are still stiff. You swing your legs over the edge of your straw mat, scratch the flea bites, and listen for the sounds that mean another day hasn't killed you yet, your wife's footsteps near the hearth. The goat bleating irritably, the soft wheeze of your old neighbor's lungs through the mud wall. Food is not guaranteed. You eat what you grow, and sometimes what you grow eats better than you. Wheat, if the weather's been kind. Barley, if it hasn't. Lentils, chickpeas, bitter herbs. And bread. Always bread. Dry, dark, and dense enough to stun a pigeon if you throw it. You soak it in goat's milk to soften it, but some mornings your jaw still aches from chewing yesterday's misery. If you're lucky, there's yogurt. Maybe a boiled egg on festival days. But most of the time, it's the same. One bowl. One spoon. One chance to feel full until dusk. The Ottoman Empire is vast, rich, glittering from afar. But you live in its dirt. The cities are full of silk and spices, yes, but you've never been to a city. You've heard about Istanbul. About its domes and towers, its fountains and palaces. But that might as well be the moon. Your world is a few square kilometers of scrubland, tilled soil, and people who have never left it. Your day is dictated by the soil. You sow, you reap, you worry. You watch the skies like they're your landlord, and in a way, they are. Too little rain, and the crops wither. Too much, and they rot. Hail? Locusts? A neighbor's jealous glance? All equally capable of turning your harvest to ash. Historians still debate the efficiency of Ottoman agricultural taxation, but from your perspective, it's very efficient. It always finds you. The tax collectors arrive on horseback, wearing turbans and mild contempt. They measure your field, the roomers arrive before the soldiers. You're stacking firewood behind your house when you hear it from the neighbor's boy, who heard it from the butcher's apprentice, who probably misheard it from someone in town. There's a new levy coming. A draft. They're taking boys again. You freeze, log in hand. You have 3 sons. The eldest just turned 15. You'd been hoping to keep that a secret from the officials. His birth year was never written down, but word spreads like spilled oil on stone. And now, the empire wants bodies. The Ottoman military machine is hungry. Always has been. The army, at its height, is one of the most feared in the world. With janissaries in polished armor and cavalry that thunder across continents. But that's not what they're sending to your village. No, this time it's conscripts. Locals. Boys like yours. 1 sword per 4 men, sometimes. You don't ask questions. You just pack what they tell you and pray they don't die too fast. Historians still debate the effectiveness of these rural levies in later centuries. Some say they were little more than meat for the front lines. Others argue they were a crucial part of Ottoman resilience. But for you, there's no debate. You're about to lose your son. The officer arrives 3 days later. He rides in with a dusty entourage. All boots and barked orders. He reads names from a scroll. Yours is on it. Your son's, that is. You try to look confused. You try to plead. But your son steps forward before you finish your sentence. He's trying to be brave. They give him a cloth bag with hard bread, a scrap of dried meat, and a dull dagger. No uniform. No training. No promises. Just a direction, east, and a date by which he should report to the regional post. You don't cry. That comes later, when no one's watching. He leaves at dawn. You give him your old belt knife. The one with the handle polished by years of calloused palms. You tell him not to be a hero. He laughs, a small sound, like a bird startled from a bush. And then he's gone. You're used to bad news arriving on horseback. But this time, it walks on 2 legs. A tax collector. Thin, sharp-nosed. Dressed in layers of dusty silk with a ledger tucked under his arm like it's the Quran itself. He doesn't smile. Doesn't blink much, either. You know why he's here. They always come after war. After harvest, after anything that might leave you with a few extra coins hidden in a clay pot. The Ottoman tax system is nothing if not imaginative. There's a rezime sift. A tax just for farming land. A rezime benek, for not owning enough land. And even a rezime musard, a tax for being an unmarried man. Your youngest son, the one who just turned 12. Suddenly becomes very interesting to the state. The collector asks how many animals you have. You answer honestly, then knock 2 off the count, just in case. He writes it down without looking up. You tell him you paid your dues in the spring. He nods. Then he adds a late penalty because the scribe who wrote the receipt didn't use the proper ink. Historians still argue whether the Ottoman tax system was more exploitative or just wildly inconsistent. Some praise its adaptability, how it allowed local officials to adjust taxes based on crop failure or military need. Others point out that in practice, it meant your fate depended on whether the local scribe had a hangover. You try not to let the anger show. You pour the collector tea. You smile. Because you've seen what happens to people who complain. Sometimes they pay more. Sometimes they're dragged to town to explain themselves. And sometimes, well, you don't ask questions about the ones who vanish. Your wife has taken to hiding money in flour sacks. You pretend not to notice. You've done the same thing, with a silver coin buried under the olive tree. You've told no one. Not even her. The empire runs on taxes. Always has. They need money to fund wars, build mosques, bribe enemies, pay janissaries who might otherwise become enemies. You understand, in the abstract. But when it's your last sheep they're counting, the abstraction feels personal. This month, the state wants more. There's a new, emergency levy to fund coastal fortresses against Venetian. Your neighbor's son doesn't come home. Not because he ran away, though the idea has probably crossed his mind more than once. He's been taken. Recruited. Or, to use the word whispered like mold under floorboards, divserm. You've heard of it all your life, the levy of Christian boys by the state. Technically, it doesn't apply to your Muslim village. But no one is feeling particularly secure lately. Rules bend. Borders blur. And boys disappear. It's the Ottoman Empire's strangest invention, stealing children to raise them as soldiers and bureaucrats, loyal only to the Sultan. And it works. That's the terrifying part. The janissaries, born of this system, are some of the most elite fighters in the world. Raised in barracks, forbidden to marry, trained from puberty to kill or calculate. Some rise to power. Most vanish into war or paperwork. Historians still argue whether the divserm system was a brilliant meritocracy or cultural kidnapping with a better PR team. The truth, as usual, depends on where you stand. If you're the Sultan, it's genius. If you're the boy's mother, it's heartbreak dipped in ink and sealed with a state emblem. You remember when a band of janissaries passed through your town 5 years ago. Their boots were polished, their uniforms clean. One of them, tall and pale-eyed, spoke Ottoman with a strange lilt, like someone who'd grown up on goat cheese and mountain fog. You asked his name. He didn't answer. Just nodded, as if names no longer mattered. Back then, it seemed distant. Something that happened to border villages or unlucky minorities. Now, it's on your doorstep. And while your own sons are technically safe, there's a tension in the air like a drumbeat. Who's next? You wonder what it's like to be a boy taken at 10. To wake in a strange bed. To be taught a new language, new religion. New way to hold a sword. To never see your parents again, and eventually, maybe, be ordered to conquer the village of your birth. Quirky detail, the divserm boys were often, you wake to find your taxes have gone up. Again. It's not a surprise, exactly, just one of those seasonal things, like frostbite or someone dying of a toothache. A man on a horse came through last week with a parchment scroll and a tired voice. The Sultan needs more money, he said. 4 roads. 4 ships. 4 war. Always war. You pay in grain, mostly. Wheat. Barley, lentils when they're not too weevil-ridden. But now, they're asking for coin, too, real minted coin, with the Sultan's face looking vaguely annoyed and overly mustached. The problem is, coin is rare out here. You haven't seen silver in months, and gold only exists in legends and wedding songs. Still, if you can't pay in coin, you pay in something. A sheep. A daughter. A finger. If you're lucky. Historians still argue how centralized the Ottoman tax system truly was. Some say it was a marvel of bureaucracy. Others say it was just bribery wearing a very elaborate hat. You head to the local Sipahi, the cavalryman granted this region as his timar, or land share. He's supposed to protect you in exchange for your taxes. But mostly, he just drinks sherbet and complains about the price of horse feed. His house has glass windows. Real glass. That's how you know he's never been hungry. He accepts your tax bundle without thanks. You don't expect one. But then he says the words you dread. There's a shortfall. You blink. I gave what we agreed. He raises an eyebrow. But the yield is higher this year, yes? You must have hidden the rest. You haven't. But what you have and what you're accused of having are rarely the same. And so begins the dance. He pretends not to believe you. You pretend to have a cousin who works in the capital. You remind him gently that you wake up to find your neighbor has vanished. Not just gone to the next village or off to sell onions at the bazaar. Vanished. His house stands empty, swept clean. The hearth is cold. The chickens are gone. His wife's loom is missing, too, like she packed it with care, knowing she wouldn't come back. Someone whispers the word, Devsherm. You try not to flinch. Because maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was his son. Or both. Or maybe they ran before the officers came. Either way, no one says it out loud. Because if they're caught hiding, the punishment will make tax season feel like a picnic. This is the child levy. The blood tax, though no one official ever calls it that. You've known it was coming since the boy turned 10. Still, it doesn't feel real until someone you know is just not there anymore. Historians still argue whether the Devsherm was truly resented, or seen as a twisted honor. Some point out that boys became viziers, generals, palace elite. Others remind you they were taken screaming, heads shaved, languages stripped, families erased. You don't care which is right. You just don't want to lose your own child. So you begin planning. Just in case. Your eldest is 12, strong, handsome, too clever for his own good. All the things the recruiters like. You try to make him seem dull. You rub mud on his face before market days. You tell him to slouch. When the officer comes, you say he's sick. Or stupid. You spend your mornings listening for hooves. Not horses, oxen don't frighten you. You can handle an irate mule. But cavalry? The Sipahi. Ottoman feudal cavalrymen who show up at your village once or twice a year, supposedly to check on their land, collect what's owed. And remind you who really owns everything you've touched since birth. And you never know which version will arrive, the polished gentleman in satin with poetry on his breath. Or the brutal one who swings a whip just to see how it sounds slicing wind. Your field isn't yours. You know this. It was granted by the Sultan to some Sipahi 100 miles away. The man probably lives in a tiled house with wine on tap and never touches soil except to spit in it. But he owns you. Technically, you're his tenant. You plow his land. You harvest his crops. You pay him with both food and obedience. Historians describe the Timar system, this land-for-service setup, as efficient, decentralized governance. A military man receives land, collects taxes from peasants like you, and in return, fights for the empire when summoned. It's feudalism with a crescent twist. But historians don't have to kneel on gravel while explaining why your barley yield was down this year. Your Lord Steward doesn't care that your wife was sick, your ox died, or the rains came late. He wants his share. He always wants his share. And if he doesn't get it, he'll take your best goat or your daughter's shawl or the last hen you've kept hidden behind the fig tree. There's a phrase you hear often, the Sultan is just. The Sipahi is near. The meaning is obvious. Far-off justice means nothing when the man with the sword is breathing on your neck. Sometimes, your Sipahi doesn't show for months. That's the good kind. You just quietly till the land, pay what you must to the tax collectors, and pray no one comes sniffing around. Other times, he camps nearby, bringing with him a trail of noise, soldiers, spoiled food, and expensive tastes. One brought a lute player once. Another demanded a feast with roast goose, sweet sherbet, and 3 kinds of bread. You had turnips and silence. He took both. Quirky tidbit: one Sipahi once demanded a wedding from every village he visited. He didn't care whose wedding, as long as there was music, meat, and a bride. You'd think the worst part of the army is the war. But no. It's the waiting. You're not a soldier, at least not today. But you're still bound to the military machine of the Ottoman Empire. Because when they come calling, whether it's the levy officer, your Sipahi lord, or that grim-faced Bascavis with ink on his hands and a scimitar at his hip, you go. You're a sekban. Or maybe a levend. Depending on who's shouting. A peasant conscript. Untrained, unpaid until further notice, and always the first to die. The empire needs bodies, and yours, apparently, is affordable. They don't send you to glorious battles with banners and drums, not at first. No, first you haul wagons, dig trenches, forage wood. Then maybe, if you're still standing, they toss you a weapon made of wood and iron and tell you to walk behind the real soldiers and hope you're not in the path of enemy cavalry. Historians often debate whether the Ottoman army was the most advanced of its time or just very good at pretending. Sure, the Janissaries were elite once. But by your time, half of them are drunk, corrupt, and more interested in market rackets than fighting. And you? You're the filler. The backdrop. You're the guy who gets shot so the vizier can say he took the hill. Quirky tidbit: the army once conscripted a village barber because they heard he was good with blades. He lasted 6 days, cut 4 throats, and then got promoted. You haven't cut hair since your cousin's wedding and it shows. You get your marching orders scrawled on rough parchment. You squint at it, wondering if your name is even spelled right. It doesn't matter. You're going. The journey is the first punishment. Your body may have left the battlefield, but the empire never lets you forget it. You're back now. In theory, you're a civilian again. But the Ottoman Empire, like a hungry cat, has a habit of playing with its food before it eats it. You're home, yes, but also not quite. Because now you're navigating something far worse than swords or dysentery. You're navigating bureaucracy. See, there's a tax for everything. A tithe for your crops. A head tax for your faith. A road fee for the path outside your house. And if you want to get married, buried, baptized, or just sit in peace on your roof at sunset, guess what? There's paperwork. And usually, a man who wants money. You're holding a scroll. It's not yours, but your neighbor's. He can't read. So you're squinting at it for him. It says he owes 5 silver coins for seasonal soil compression rights. What does that mean? No one knows. But the collector will be here by Wednesday. And he carries a stick. Historians still debate whether the Ottoman administrative system was a marvel of early modern governance or just a patchwork of bribes stitched together with red ink. They're both probably right. Because on parchment, it's glorious, layers of registers, scribes, checks, balances, timars, qadis, muftis. But in practice, it's like trying to milk a goat that doesn't exist. Lots of motion, no result. Let's say you want to complain. You march, respectfully, to the local qadi, the judge. He greets you with a sigh. He's already processed 3 marriage disputes, 2 cases of olive theft, and a cat ownership scandal today. Your case? A corrupt tax officer shaking down your cousin? He nods, writes it down, and files it in the pile labeled, "When time allows." That pile is large enough to have its own postal code. You walk home, empty-handed. Again. But it's not just the state that squeezes you. The sipahi, the cavalryman who holds your land as a fief, wants a share of your wheat. Your imam wants a gift for Eid. Your guild master wants dues. Even though your weaving business collapsed last spring when your loom caught fire and your apprentice ran off with your cousin. You pay. You always pay. Not because you can, but because not paying is worse. Here's a quirky fact: in one province, people were fined for growing tomatoes. Not because tomatoes were banned, just because the local official decided they were too red and suspicious. You, wisely, grow onions. You wake up to shouting. Not the dramatic kind, like in stories. Not the roar of rebellion or the clash of armies. Just the mundane, familiar cry of neighbors arguing over water rights. Again. It's been a dry spring, and the canal that trickles through your village is more memory than resource. You shuffle outside. The sun is already clawing its way over the hills. And your back hurts in that specific way that says, you're not young, but you still have work to do. You try to ignore the noise, the heat, the smell of unwashed animals and poorly extinguished dung fires. Because today, you have something more important on your mind. Your future. If that's even a thing people have here. Historians still argue whether Ottoman subjects truly saw themselves as having futures, in the modern sense. Most likely, you saw time as a cycle. Plant, harvest, survive. Repeat. And hope the Sultan never notices you. But today, you're thinking bigger. You heard rumors, whispers from a traveling merchant. Of change. Of new machines in Europe. Of ships sailing past the Cape of Good Hope. Of books printed so fast they outrun the censors. And you, standing in the same spot where your great-grandfather stood, start to wonder, what's out there? Then the rumors reach closer to home. Janissaries muttering in the barracks. Tax revolts in distant provinces. Viziers falling out of favor like spoiled fruit. The empire doesn't feel as eternal as it used to. Something's shifting. You can feel it. You're not the only one. Your cousin, a reckless dreamer with a chipped tooth and too much confidence, thinks the empire is rotting from the inside. He says, "The Sultan's in his palace chasing tulips while the rest of us eat boiled hay." He wants to run away. Head west. He's heard Venice takes in deserters. You shake your head. It's suicide. Or worse, hopeful. Still, you help him pack. Not because you believe he'll make it. But because, for a moment, you like pretending there's a door in this wall. Here's a fringe tidbit. In the 17th century, Ottoman astrologers warned that certain planetary alignments signaled the fall of empires. Some people, especially in cities, took it seriously. There were fasts, prayers, even riots. You don't have the stars. You just have a cracked teacup and the sound of your own breathing at night. And then comes the census. Another one. You're lined up with everyone else. A scribe asks your name, age, trade, religion, number of teeth. You try to be polite. But when he asks how many buckets of lentils you consume in a month, you crack. Enough, you mutter. He writes. Uncooperative. You'll regret that. Because soon after, your home is visited by the Azaps, the irregular conscripts. They're not here to fight. They're here to requisition. For what, no one's sure. Some say it's for the Sultan's next campaign. Others whisper it's just about reminding people who's boss. Either way, they leave with your best blanket and your last pot of honey. You stand there. Empty arms, staring at the dust where your dignity used to be. And what can you do? You're not a rebel. You're not even angry, just exhausted. That's the magic of this place. It doesn't kill your body. It just slowly convinces your soul to lie. You're older now. Not old like the village elder, with his riddle-stained beard and eyes that seem to have watched empires crumble. But old enough to feel time pressing gently but persistently against your ribs. Old enough to wake up before the rooster and lie there, listening to the slow ache of your bones, thinking. Is this what legacy feels like? Or just indigestion? The house is quieter. Some people have died, others have gone. Your cousin who wrote from Dubrovnik, no word in years. Probably dead. Or rich. Same thing. Outside, the trees look the same as they did when you were a child. But they're not. Neither are you. The Empire, too, wears a familiar face with unfamiliar eyes. There are more soldiers on the road now. Fewer poets in the square. The markets feel heavier, like everything costs more but gives back less. You've heard people say the empire is reforming. Others call it cracking. You don't know the right word. You just know your taxes have doubled and your bread's gotten smaller. Historians still argue whether the Tanzimat reforms of the 19th century actually helped the average Ottoman subject or merely created a new layer of bureaucratic misery. You wouldn't know a Tanzimat from a turnip. What you do know is that ever since the new officials arrived, everything has to be written down. Permits. Registries. Receipts. You needed a stamped document to bury your aunt. And they charged you for the ink. Here's a quirky detail. One of the reforms included creating a modern postal system, but no one told the donkeys. So mail still arrives late, often damp, and occasionally chewed. You've become something of a local expert on patience. Patience with lines. With laws. With life. Sometimes young people ask you questions. What was it like during the famine? Did you ever see the Janissaries? Is it true people used to bathe in rosewater? You answer with a shrug. You remember the taste of boiled roots. The sound of metal boots. The smell of sweat and incense. But most of all, you remember how nothing ever changed as fast as people said it would. And yet, you've seen strange things. Men with European hats measuring the streets. Women wearing strange new corsets and calling it fashion. A school for girls opening near the mosque. Once. You even heard music from a foreign stringed instrument, something between a catfight and a lullaby. The world has not ended. But it's become slightly less predictable. And maybe that's worse. Your neighbor's son talks about citizenship. He says the Sultan wants everyone to be equal now. You chuckle. The Sultan wants equal tax, maybe. Equal suffering, sure. But equal power? That's a bedtime story, and not a particularly good one. And yet again, there's that flicker, same as when your cousin wrote from Dubrovnik. The idea that something else is possible. Something beyond the wheat and the well and the wedding feast. But you've lived long enough to know that new ideas come dressed like messiahs but often act like tax collectors. You sit on your stoop as evening cools the air. The call to prayer floats like silk over the rooftops. Children run past with sticks and no shoes. A woman carries water on her head. A cat stares at you like you owe it money. This is life. Still hard. still here. The empire hasn't collapsed. Not yet. But it limps. Some say it's too large. Too diverse. Too ancient to survive the age of railroads and revolutions. Others argue it could have lasted centuries more, if only it had been more ruthless or less. If the reforms had gone deeper. Or shallower. If the West had stayed out. If the East had risen sooner. If. You smile. Historians and their ifs. You know better. You've lived the whens. When the food ran out. When the roof caved in. When the conscription order came. When the scribe marked your family as insufficiently devout. When your sister was married off to a man she never met. Who paid in silver and sheep. When you sang the old song at her wedding, the one your mother taught you, pretending not to cry. So yes, life sucked in the Ottoman Empire. But you didn't die. Not yet. You kept rising. Kept cooking. Kept planting things that might not grow. You stitched and borrowed and lied politely to survive. And sometimes, on nights like this, you even laughed. Not because things were good. But because they were. And now, as the wind stirs the laundry on the line and the stars begin their nightly performance, you wonder what will remain when you're gone. Not your name. Not your debts. Probably not your goat. But maybe, just maybe, your story. And now, here you are. Still. Breathing. Letting the weight of centuries dissolve across your chest like mist. The noise has faded. No arguments. No footfalls. No marching boots or market cries. Just the soft breath of wind outside a wooden window. The steady rhythm of your heart. That ancient, unbroken beat. You've carried so much. And you never asked for praise, or monuments. Or history books to remember you. You asked for shelter. For food. For the people you love to stay alive another season. And that, somehow, was always enough. Now, as you lie back, under a fraying blanket, or beneath an olive tree, or in a small apartment listening to this tale from far away, know that your story matters. Because behind every empire are people like you. Tired. Kind. Resilient. Often invisible. And maybe that's the strangest magic of all, how you endured. So let your eyes soften. Let your shoulders release whatever they've been holding. There are no more taxes tonight. No conscription. No sultans. No sand in your sandals or soot in your stew. Just this quiet. This moment. This breath. You're not alone. Not in the 1600s. Not now. Because someone remembers you. And sometimes, that's all it takes.